Hello. Hello, guys. Good afternoon. All right, it's that time of the month again where we do our stand up. 2 weeks ago, we had this session where we went through a lot of the things that we've been doing in the last 2 weeks. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing today. But also, we have a special guest that I am especially excited about. Okay, and we also have Jones. Some of you guys know Jones. Jones joined us. It's been about 2 months now, and it feels like he's been part of the business for a very long time. Honestly, it's one of the best decisions we made as a business. So, he's joining us on this call today. Let me bring him on stage, and he's going to be helping us to anchor the conversation that we're going to be having with our special guest. Okay, so for those who do not know Sandra, I'll let Jones do the introduction, but let me warn you ahead. This is not a session you want to be distracted, okay, about. If you have your Instagram, your Twitter, your Snapchat, whatever it is, this is the time to put it away. Okay, this is the time to turn it off. Silence. If I were you, I'll switch it off completely. I'll turn it off, especially if you're not using your phone, if you're joining from a laptop. But there is a whole lot of information you guys are going to learn today as regards to tech career. Okay, so it's one thing to be learning tech and getting the skills. It's another thing entirely to understand how it is to survive and excel in the industry. And that's part of the things that we'll be talking about today. Now, as you know, I'm going to be going through the comments to know what you guys have been working on in the last 2 weeks. So while we are having our discussions, make sure you go to the chat section and you keep putting in there your progress. So for those who have been implementing projects on Diary.io, or you're part of the Externs program, whatever progress you have made in the last 2 weeks, since the last time we had this call, put it in the comment and then I will go through it after our session with Sandra. All right. If you have challenges that you've been facing or you're struggling to progress on certain things, that's also welcome to put in the chat, and we'll spend some time going through everything. Okay, so Jones, I'm gonna hand the mic over to you while I also bring Sandra on stage. Hello, Sandra.
Hello, how
can
are
you? Hear
you?
me all right? I can hear you.
I can hear
Jones,
you. You can't hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay.
That was
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Like echo. Good afternoon or good evening, Sandra, and thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone. Normally, I'm dialed in so I can see who's attended and who hasn't, and be part of the conversation. But I can't today. So I'm super chuffed, super pleased to be part of this week's meetup, and I'm super excited to introduce Sandra to you. And we're going to be spending some time kind of getting to get her perspective on a number of factors related to tech and tech careers. If you haven't seen her profile, please go and have a look at LinkedIn and all the rest of it. But suffice to say, Sandra sitting here is representing an individual who, from a standing start, has navigated all levels of the tech career or IT career ladder. And she's done that from the ground up in different areas. Predominantly, most recently, she's done that in the banking and finance industry, and now she leads as part of the executive team in ATIS. But when I was listening to a call Sandra and Daria had recently, she kind of shared with us something that was quite interesting. She said she's pretty much done everything there is to do. And some of the stuff that you're already doing, from shell scripting to leadership to project management to program management to coding so she really has a broad base of understanding from the front lines, and also in terms of where we all want to aspire towards to share with us today. So without overselling it, Sandra, I'm just going to ask you about 5 or 6 questions today, and that should be enough to get us going. And Daria will share and chime in for the community.
Sure.
But it would be great for you to start by kind of giving us an overview an overview of your career, how it spanned, how it started, and where you are right now in your journey.
Okay, so I started my career about 30 odd years ago, and I was fortunate enough to get a role in what was then an investment bank. The investment bank doesn't exist anymore, and I started in the data center. So if you're listening to conversations around AI and they're talking about data centers and building data centers, I actually used to work in a data center in the days when people were actually in the data center. Now most data centers are lights out. There's nobody in the data center. And that's a whole different world now. But I started my career in the data center, and I used to do move tapes around, run systems from the back end, and that was in a financial services company called Bankers Trust. And essentially, I worked in what was called the European data center. So it used to cover Europe, London, Asia, and also cover sub-applications that used to run out of the US. So essentially, we ran a 24/7 shift pattern, which is essentially what I was part of. And I started my career there as a trainee. And I managed myself for the next 5 to 7 years through that, became the operations manager in that organization. And then I left that role and moved to a new role inside the same organization. And as Jones has said, I used to write shell scripts. So I actually left that role to move to another role inside what we call the custody part of the bank. And I used to write shell scripts, right? I was a DBA, database administrator, and for a custody application that does processing for trade on behalf of clients. And I did that for maybe 3 or 4 years. I moved from what was then called the custody area into fixed income, and I started writing C++ code. And how, you might say to yourself, well, how did you move from different parts of the organization to different areas? And really, it was essentially learning the skills, or taking the skills that I'd learned in one area and moving them into another. And ultimately what I did is I paid attention, right? So when I was in the data center, if there was a problem overnight, you'd ring up whoever the support person was, and you'd open up the code and you'd go and have a look at it, right? And they would tell, they change this, change that. And that's how I learned. And also I went to courses in the evening, and I used to go home at night and read and take some of the, back in those days, there were books. There was nothing online. And so, you used to go into the bookshop and you'd buy books. So you buy, Unix for Dummies or C++ for Dummies or whatever that book was. And that's such a long time ago now. And those are the books I used to use. And I'd have it with me on my desk. I used to carry it around with me. So if there were anything that I needed to check or look up, I'd always have it. And I'd bookmark certain areas for things that you essentially use every single time. But I was able to move through the organization, picking up different skills, and that leveraged me into moving on to another area to learn new skills. So I suppose the thing to note here is, you can't be afraid to move on, right? So when an opportunity presents itself, you should take it. That's always been my view. You can always go back. You can't always go forward, right? So, I could always go back and be a Unix scripter or a DBA, but I wasn't always going to have the opportunity to go forward and be a C++ developer. So that's essentially what I did. And then I got an opportunity to do Java developer, become a Java developer, which I did not enjoy at all. So next lesson, if you don't enjoy it, keep moving, right? So I did not enjoy that at all. And then I got an opportunity to, as you spend time with parts of the business that you're working in, there are always other roles around you, and the time is to spend time thinking about or asking questions of those people. So I'd always spend time going to speak to other people and ask them what they did. What are you doing? Right. So I can actually figure out what they're doing, and maybe I might enjoy that. If there's an opportunity for me to do that, and if there was a task that was coming up, somebody would say, would you be interested in doing that? I go, yes. Right. So that I can actually see whether I was going to enjoy that. And if I wasn't going to enjoy that, then that would be the last time I would say yes to that particular thing. So I think those are the things, is to take the opportunity when a question's being asked, if there's an opportunity for you to do something, to find out whether this is something that you'd enjoy and that you maybe want to take the next step when an opportunity presents itself, to move on to that. Right. So that's the message, really, as I moved through my career. I went and worked in the front office, and then that bank was bought out by Deutsche Bank. So that was my next company that I worked for. I worked in that company for a couple of years, and then I left as I took the opportunity to become a project manager. So they were looking for, they were starting off different projects. There was this wholesale re-engineering that was being done. And I took the opportunity to kind of move into a leadership role. And I went and did an APM and Prince course, if anybody remembers what those are, project management courses. And I went and became a project manager within the same organization. And then I had an opportunity then when one of my managers was leaving Deutsche Bank and moved to JP Morgan. She asked me if I would like to come across, and I said, why not? And so I left Deutsche Bank, went to work for JP Morgan. So, and then, JP Morgan was a completely different organization, right? You think all banks are exactly the same. They are definitely not the same. And have a different culture, different ethos, and the way they work, which was very, what I would call today focused. So everything was today. When I worked at Deutsche, it was much more, let's talk about it, spend a little bit more time thinking about it. But actually in American institutions, it's all about today.
Yeah.
So I was at JP Morgan for 10 years. I started there as a project manager, and I started as an AVP, and I became a director there. And I ran their European technology group for clearance and collateral management. So I did that for 2 years. And then I subsequently left that. So actually, when I was there, my last role there, I had about 200 people who reported into me. There were people in London and in Bournemouth and in the US. And then we had a very large contingent in India. And we had a number of offshore development teams that that also did work for us. And we did it across 4 or 5 different business units. So part of my role was to actually not just manage the team, the technology team, but it was also be the stakeholder for the business as well. So whether that becomes the operational group or it's the business group, and any changes that they're making to grow their business, essentially those changes would come to me, and then I would opine over across those changes and decide which teams within my purview would do that work. So that's essentially what my role was. I subsequently left JP Morgan and actually decided to set up my own company. I did that for 10 years. And that was really interesting because I spent some time in Moscow. Right, so I got an opportunity to work for a brokerage. And I'd never been to Moscow before, so I thought, why not? Let me do that. So I met some really interesting people. And I suppose it's what's the thing to always think about is that you always think if you watch the news that some people are good and some people are bad. Actually, people are just people, right? Everybody's just trying to do the best that they can for their families. Right, regardless of where they're absolutely sitting in the world, right?
Yes.
And there are so many things that you can learn from those people that you meet along the way. So that was really interesting. I did that for a couple of years, and then I was back at Deutsche Bank, and I ran their equity derivatives team. I came in there as a contractor there. I ran one of their transformation programs, which ran for, so that was I had about 10 people that reported into me in order to be able to deliver that. And then when I'd completed that, and they subsequently asked me to take over the team, which was running out of London, which was running out of the US. Essentially, the reporting lines moved back into the UK because that's where I was based, and I had teams in Hong Kong, New York, and in one of their locations in South Carolina. So yeah, there was a lot of what we call follow the sun, right? So you have a platform that supports trading for all the different traders across the globe for equity derivatives, and therefore in each location you need to make sure that we have support in order to deliver what the business is asking for. And training is essentially very important because that's essentially what the bank is all set up to do. That's what it does, right? So I did that until last year. Last year, I decided to leave Deutsche Bank and essentially go and work for a startup called ATIS. ATIS is a healthcare technology company startup, and it's looking at wound care, looking at diabetes and wound care. But it's not just doing that. It was also looking at construction safety. It was also looking at consumables. It was looking at a number of pillars that the organization was trying to deliver to. So I did get to spend quite a lot of time in Singapore and meeting lots of different clients in that region. The difference really for that was that I've never really done specific client relationships, because generally my client is the business, right? So I don't actually see the client. I actually service the business, who might be the trader, or it might be somebody internal to the bank who actually has a relationship with the client. So that was my first real role where I had a relationship with a client, which was really interesting. So yeah, so I've done that, and now I spend some time, I've become an investor in Black Rise, which is a new technology company that's been set up here in the UK. So I'm giving some consultancy for them, and really just looking at I've been speaking to Dario and I'm speaking to Jones about what you guys are doing over there. And one of the reasons why is because I'm really really passionate about how do we upskill people in Africa and in the Caribbean, and how do we get everyone on the same level playing field that is available to us here in Europe and in the US. And, how do we achieve that? And so what you're doing there is a very interesting proposition, purely because that's not how it's done today, right? So it definitely is a gap in the market that you're trying to fill. And so that's really quite exciting. So what I'm looking for now are things that are going to be innovative and exciting. And that's what I'm interested in, because I've done the banking thing.
That's phenomenal. You've culminated that by saying you're going to be joining us. Something's going to happen, something big. So just hold yourself there, but that's another issue for another time. But thank you for sharing that anyway, because I think underlying that really is I'm not from necessarily a technical background in terms of IT, but I'm hearing a world in which you took ownership of your learning, and you had the opportunity to move around and to self-educate and adapt going through the process, right? And that brings you to the here and now. But of course, the marketplace in terms of knowledge, the marketplace in terms of IT, the marketplace in terms of technology has changed. The way people learn has changed. The diaries of the world is here. We give thanks.
Yeah.
But so I really want to try and press you on a couple of things now, for the sake of the audience as well. So going back a couple of steps and thinking about your recruitment hat, the people you led, can you share what you look for when it comes to deciding on the talent you want to bring on board your teams? You know, what are the things that you expect to see in any way you feel like is important for you? It'll be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I suppose for me, there's a whole technical part of it, because essentially if you sit in a technical space, that's what you're looking for. But there's also the softer side of that, which is whether this person is asked questions. The first thing I always look for is somebody asks questions. If nobody asks me any questions, no, because they're not interested. So if they're not interested, then when they come here, they're not going to ask any questions then, and then I'm going to have to babysit them, which I don't want to do, right? So interested in what people have done, not necessarily on a technical side. I'm always interested in how well-rounded someone is, right? Sometimes people have come, especially if they don't come from a tech background, and what they're trying to do is move into tech. You know, they have skills that people who've just done a straight tech degree don't have, right? So there's always a balance. But I look at people who are interested in what you are trying to deliver and trying to achieve, because then they will make the most effort to get there.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes you get people who know exactly what you're asking for, and they literally become, what do we call them? The superstars. You know, you can only support one superstar in a team. You cannot have 10 of them. It's a nightmare. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for. I mean, that's really interesting. Really interesting, and it's great to hear directly from you in that position. I'm going to bring Dari in, right? Because obviously you're aware Dari came in here to the UK with, as it were, no experience in tech. So Dari, do you want to share your experience in terms of trying to advance and maybe some of the pushback you got and what you had to become or what you had to learn in order to start breaking into the industry in terms of your IT career?
It's quite interesting that Sandra mentioned about people asking questions, right? And that attribute is something that is very important even at the time of learning. Because if you don't develop that attribute of asking questions right from the start, you know, first of all, you're not interested. And I wonder how you'll be able to get to the point where you're trying to get a job and you're not asking questions. And that's one way we also know as a business on our platform if people are learning or not, because we have this social learning thing going on our platform where people have a community. So if you sign up today, you start learning. Okay, yes, we have our AI and stuff that's, you know, capturing data, and we have a dashboard that tells us a lot of things. But if you're not asking questions, it's a sign already that you're not learning, you're not doing anything. So that question bit is very, very important right from the start. But back to, it's very interesting when Sandra mentioned about, you know, starting off doing the whole DBA thing, because I resonate with that, because that's exactly where I got started off too. You know, when I was to make my switch into tech from a completely different thing, the first thing I did was learning SQL. That was I lied. The first thing I tried to learn was HTML and CSS and all that, and I didn't enjoy it, you know. And the reason I didn't enjoy it at the time was someone said to me, I was in my very early 30s at the time. And while I was trying to learn, I reached out to someone who was into tech, and the guy was like, Dari, you're too late. You can't learn this. It's too late for you now. If you want to do tech, you should have started 10 years ago, you know? And for a second, I thought, well, maybe he's right. But then again, I thought there has to be something that I can learn that won't necessarily require me a long time. So in my head, I had this sense of urgency because I had a baby on the way, you know, a lot of things going on in my life. And I had this sense of urgency as well, that I need to get this done quickly. I need to start making money, right? So when I was learning HTML and all that web stuff, it was seeming like a long time for me. You know, I was like, oh, man, when am I going to learn this? And then I'm thinking I still have to learn JavaScript and CSS and this and that. So I thought, okay, there has to be something else I can learn that can get me there quickly. And while I was searching, database administration came to me, and it felt like something that was focused in one direction already. And all I had to learn at the time was SQL, right? Even though I was setting myself up for trap because I thought I was going to learn SQL alone, but by the time I started picking up Oracle, I realized I still have to learn Linux. I still have to learn a lot of things. And you know what happened when you start digging a hole? You just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's how I found myself into many other things, picked up big data, cloud, and now DevOps and, you know, all the other things. But, you know, like Sandra mentioned, you can only keep going forward, right? How did you say? You can always keep going forward, right? Or not backward.
Yeah. Well, if you can always go backwards, but you can't always go forward.
Exactly. So, and that was the thing, right? So what's the fear? You know, if there are opportunities, you know, just go for it. Just go for it. Try something, you know, and never say no to people, especially when they tell you things like, you can never do it. You're too old for it. Honestly, like this. I wish I still have the number and the name of the guy that said that to me. Call him right now and say, bro, I made it. And he said I wasn't.
He's most probably still sitting in the same chair.
Yeah. That's how it tends to be. That's how it tends to be. Cool. All right. Let me bring it back to another perspective. I've only got 2 more questions for you, Sandra, and then we're going to open it up for the rest of the guys. Maybe some questions, then we go into the rest of the session, right? Because I know your time is valuable. It is an evening. So let's get 2 perspectives on when things go wrong, right? So could you maybe, Sandra, just go back to the nearest time, maybe when you're in a sort of IT specific role, a project that perhaps went wrong and the lessons you learned in terms of how you navigated those moments. I know it's high stakes, right? Particularly in the roles you were in. So help me to understand that. And Harry, you can then chime in with when you've effed up, you know, when you've messed up in your journey, right? And how you what you learned and how you overcame that. So Sandra, if you could go first, and Dari, maybe that would be another perspective to share. We'll have one more question after that and we'll let you go.
So I think when you realize, because it's a daunting feeling when you realize something's gone wrong, right? It's not like today, oh, this has gone wrong. No, it doesn't really work like that. It's like, you know, you're maybe sitting in a room and you're trying to understand why, you know, people are complaining about something, and then you have this dawning realization that we've missed it. We've missed something, right? And then you're like, oh God, okay, what are we going to do now? Okay, so that it's to most probably step back and think, okay, what are we going to do? How can we do it? And what do we need to change in order to be able to put this back where it needs to be, right? Because it's not, and it's to be honest, really, in a lot of ways, right? You can sit down with your business partners or whoever it is and say, look, you know, we understood this to mean X. Now we understand this means Y. That's not what's been done. We'll go away and take a look at it and come back and let you know if this is additional work, more, you know, how long it's going to take, right? Because the reality is that everybody's jumping up and down at that point, right? So that's a project deliverable. But when you've had a problem where the system is broken, you know, and you have this cold chill down your spine, and you realize how broken it is, you're like, oh my God. Because then you're like sitting there going, well, it's doing this. And then you think, and somebody goes, oh, but it's doing this. And you're like, oh God, oh, I know what that is. That is especially when it's, in some ways, what you then do is you mitigate. You kind of say, okay, well, who can see it? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it visible to a client? Because if it's not visible to the client, then, you know, this is what we're going to do. And we'll put together, you know, this is what we found, this is what we're going to do, this is how long it's going to take, because that's what people want. They want to know that you have understood what their problem is. Before you give a resolution, you've understood their problem. Because if you still can't explain to them what the problem is, they will have no faith They'll have no faith that you can deliver the fix.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding and articulating what the problem is, and then coming up with, okay, how are we going to, how do you mitigate that? So managing that with your management, if it's client visible, if the client can see it, then now this has to be managed in a very different way than if it's internal.
Yeah.
If something's internal, then make sure all the people who need to be aware of it are aware of it. So they may come back and say, oh, and this is happening. So you gather all your information. So the whole thing is to be transparent.
Yep.
Be transparent. Don't try and hide it.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows, because they can see it. It's just that you think they can't see it. So that's, but that's when you realize maybe that's to do with a change you put in at the weekend, or, and you're just like, oh my God, I could have, this is like, I could have just saved myself from this. If I just didn't do it, I'd have been fine.
Perspective.
Yeah.
Darren, anything to add from your perspective?
And to be honest, if you are a curious person, the chances that you're going to break things is higher.
Yes, absolutely, every time. Because you just think you can just do that a little bit more. If I just do it a little bit more, that'll be really cool. You're like, no, why did they do that?
Yeah. But there are times when it's okay to break things, and there are times where it is just not okay, right? But the most important thing is transparency, like Sandra mentioned. It's very important, to be transparent about it, and then to really understand what it is that's been broken and why and things like that. But I can share a few of my experience because I have broken things, right? I've literally broken things to the point one day my boss called me and said, Darren, if this happens again, you're fired. Like literally. Literally. And that stuck, we were in a car. He called me into his car. I was sitting in this car and he had that conversation with me. And it was, Darren, if this happens again, because that was the second time it was going to happen, even though it wasn't exactly the same thing, but similar thing, but it made me become a lot more cautious. But the good thing is it didn't take the curiosity in me away. I was always still curious. I wanted to try things. But things have changed, because now there are things in place that could, to a large extent, mitigate that, because now you work in an environment where things are highly automated. You go through change requests, you go through, pull requests, and, people review your code, you do pairing sessions. All those things happen today for a reason, because the chances of breaking things is actually very high in tech. And back in the days when, I was working as a DBA, you don't have automation to the point where we have in the cloud space today. You have run books. When it's time for the change window, you have a run book, you go through the run book and you step by step, and, things are just designed to break in some sense, if you like, so yeah.
It's really interesting. You keep saying as if that's the past. That is the present.
That's true.
Yeah. You said that before.
Yeah, I said that before. Are you correct?
It's not true.
Oh yes. But yeah, it's one of those things. But that was
awesome.
my show.
All right, I hope that's been helpful. And I'm trying to round off in a way that kind of brings together everything we do at Dare.io, right? So I suppose we can close off with just your views on what you think and how you think businesses need to leverage technology, whichever technologies you feel are most prominent, to really gain a competitive edge. In the here and now. Sandra, this is just for you, right? So how do you feel, and what do you feel businesses should be thinking about and doing when it comes to technology for that competitive edge?
I mean, I think the way it stands now is it's available to everyone now, right? I mean, when I started in tech was really for people who could afford it, right? Now everyone can afford it. People have got it in their phone, right? Everybody's got one, right? Now the question is, do you know what to do with it, right? So do you want to be a maker of tech or a consumer of tech? some people who are consumers of tech think they're making it just by liking and all that, but no, they're not. They're just consuming, you know, to get into a space. And if you look across, this is why I think startups are really quite interesting, because if you look across what people are trying to do now, they're trying to automate in every single area, right? Healthcare, you know, banking has already done it, right? Healthcare. But if you look at what the big companies have done, like Amazon and Google, they've created a space and a platform that is accessible to everyone, right? So just in terms of the cost to actually build something on a platform with some tooling to actually just create something that someone will go, this is really cool, right? Doesn't cost a lot of money.
Not like you used to. Yeah.
When you know, data centers and, you know, machines and, you know, you need to have a lot of like compute to do certain things. That's really not true anymore. So I think that so therefore any idea, right, is easier to come to fruition than it used to be. So if you just look at what's happening in the AI space, I mean, it was very interesting, right? I was watching something on Instagram and I thought I'll test it out on ChatGTP, right? So it was, you know, somebody was saying, oh, you know, who's scored the most goals, whatever it was, and I went to ChatGPT and I knew the answer wasn't Cristiano Ronaldo, right? It was a lady called Christine, and I went to ChatGPT and I said, I put it in the question in, and it came back with Cristiano Ronaldo. And then I wrote back to it and I said, can you tell me the woman who's had scored the most goals? And she'd scored more goals than Cristiano Ronaldo, right? And it gave me the answer. And I put it back in and said, well, that means Cristiano Ronaldo is not correct. And it apologized to me. It apologized to me, said, yes, I was absolutely right. And when I put the question again, it gave me the right answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That, right, is amazing. Because it's learning. It's somebody gave it the wrong answer, then you gave it, you asked it 2 questions, then it realized actually that was wrong. Apologize and move forward. How many men do you know would apologize and move forward? Most of them would argue that actually I didn't say it was a man or a woman. Right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't care. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just is.
Yeah.
And that is very unique in where we stand now, because it hasn't always been thus.
Yeah. So you feel that AI is an example of, so what you're saying is what, maximizing the opportunity to bring things to life with tools like AI effectively, right?
Yeah, or any tooling, because essentially now everybody's got access to the tooling, right? Anyone can go onto Amazon Cloud and like buy a little bit of compute, build something and see it run, right? When back in the day, you know, just putting in, you'd have to have a machine, you know, I can do it on my phone, right? You'd have to have a machine and you'd have to have enough CPU and you have to have enough RAM and all this kind of stuff, right? You'd have to have all of that before you could log on to something where you could actually run it. You couldn't run it on your machine, right? So it's completely different now. And actually everybody's got access. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, everyone has access. And that's different because actually it's a level playing field.
Speaking of which, that's a fantastic segue to thanking you for your contribution and to sharing and to re-emphasizing the idea of a level playing field. And also realizing that what we are doing with Direct.io is actually democratizing the access to elite level learning so that everyone gets access to this space. And me and Dario are working on some stuff today for some stuff. And, you know, we're looking at, what does it say here? 2023, you know, it's a 224 billion industry in terms of, you know, IT as a sector. So the more we invent, the more opportunity, the more technology, the more stacks, the more learning, and the cycle continues, right? And so we're super excited to be in this space because we're enabling that level playing field. And we're thankful to you for joining us, because I know you are definitely committed to, you know, and you've already done so over your time in helping everyone get that level playing field. So on that note, thank you again, and I would hand back to Dari and relieve you, Sandra. We'll be in touch, especially about some of the stuff you mentioned. And enjoy your evening. And yeah, Dari, feel free to take.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. All right. So there we go. Thank you very much, Jones, as well. I'm going to remove Jones from the session so I can start going through some of the questions. And if you have asked questions relating to things that Sandra would have mentioned, I will try to respond. If it's something I cannot respond to, I'll take those questions and I'll send an email to her. And then maybe in the next 2 weeks when we gather again, we'll go over it and give a response based on the things that she responds to. So what I'd like you guys to do now is in the chat section, start putting your questions in there. The things that I can answer them. But also, most importantly, let's not forget the purpose of why we're gathered here every 2 weeks is actually to keep an account of what we have been doing in the last 2 weeks. And if you have missed out on the things that we've been discussing, you know, when Sandra was here, please make sure that you watch the recording afterwards. And next time, make sure you come in early so that you don't miss out on important stuff. And what we're going to be trying to do is to bring in guests like Sandra, industry players, people who can motivate us and help us to achieve our dreams. Okay, so I'm going to scroll all the way up and try and see if I can start looking through the questions, or probably I should start from below and then work way back up. Okay, so Faith, you wanted to ask a question. Please drop in your question so that I can take that and probably get you feedback the next time we're gathered again. Okay, so Olajuwon has asked that I currently do IT support, but earnestly desire to pivot into cloud DevOps and ultimately cybersecurity, but I have no idea where to start. So I can tell you for free that where to start is where you are right now. Okay, so you are actually with a community that is focused on solving the problem that you have mentioned. And it's good that you're coming from an IT support perspective because it means you have some knowledge around networking, hardware, and you can take all that knowledge to start doing things, you know, in the cloud. Now, you mentioned about cybersecurity. I guess when you start your DevOps journey, you will realize that there's an angle of DevOps that focuses a lot on security, and that's DevSecOps. So you may find yourself focusing more around DevOps and doing security things within the DevOps space and specialize as a DevSecOps engineer, or you could pivot completely into cybersecurity. That's also fantastic. Okay, so Toby is asking, what is the basic stack or technology you can use to break into tech? So it depends on which area in tech you're trying to break into, okay? But at the minimum, regardless of the industry you want to get into, what I personally like to advise people is to get your hands on Linux. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Even if you're a developer or a data scientist, data analyst, whatever it is you're trying to do, learning Linux operating system is one of the fundamental things that I think every engineer should know. At least know how to navigate the terminal, at least the barest minimum, you know, because even if you're working as a data engineer, you get to interact with the file system through your code sometimes. You know, you want to retrieve files and you want to understand how to, you know, get things going. You run into errors relating to permission, for example. You want to move files around, you know, those things become easy for you to debug just because you have the fundamental knowledge around Linux. But then again, you have to look at the space you want to get into. And based on that space, you can then figure out those things that you need to highlight at the barest minimum. So for example, if you're tending towards the data space, at the barest minimum, you want to learn one database querying language, which in this case, SQL, and a programming language specific to data engineering, which, as you may already guess, it's going to be Python. So at the barest minimum, you want to understand those. All the other things will come in as you go along, visualization, and maybe if you want to go into big data, machine learning, learning about Spark, and some big data technologies. Those things will come in as you go along. Now, as you know, if you're focusing on, let's say, DevOps, cloud, barest minimum, learn the basics of cloud computing, Linux operating system, and as you get deeper into DevOps, automation, and all that, so that's how that goes. Then Joshua's asking if we run internship program. So we actually run externship program. So what our externship program means is once you acquire basic knowledge in Linux, cloud, and a bit of automation, you can join our externship program, which goes through an application process. If you're qualified, we bring you in, and what that means is you get to work on production systems, working with other engineers, project managers, understanding the ceremonies that happen in the real world, sprint planning, retrospective, collaborating with other engineers, whether it's through gigs or pipelines or whatnot. So you get to have that experience, and it's the true accelerator because it gives you the on-the-job type of experience. But that requires certain level of skills before you can join that. And it's a paid service, by the way. So it's something you have to pay for because we need that to help us run the infrastructure behind it. But it works. It works. I mean, it's the best solution when it comes to getting the real knowledge to launch your career in tech. All right. Someone is asking, I'm over 40 and I've always wondered if I was too old to change career. Excuse me. If anyone would be willing to employ and engage someone my age, thank you, Dario, for sharing your experience today. And I hope you find the person who said you couldn't switch it to okay. Yeah, thank you very much for that. I hope, actually, I don't think I would, to be honest, because I can't even remember what he looks like. I know he's my brother from Nigeria. He's a Nigerian man, an older person. He runs an IT shop. And I remember speaking to him vividly then, and he was like, Dario, you can't do it. You're too old. But yeah, I mean, we've had people who are in their 50s join Dario.io and launch their tech career. I kid you not, honestly. We've had people literally coming from, there was a particular person coming from civil engineering, someone coming from petroleum, lives in Canada, used to be in the oil and gas space and got tired of the whole rig thing and literally pivot into tech at, I think it was probably 49 or 50 or so, and doing very well right now. So, and there are lots of people like that, honestly, lots of people. So you'll be surprised. Okay. Lennox says, for someone who is interested in DevOps and cannot afford the fee now, what should I start learning with free courses? So there are a few things you can do from a free perspective. I mean, first of all, YouTube, there are tons and tons and tons of material on YouTube that you can access, okay? The problem with that is knowing what to focus on, because you will have pool of materials. You have materials on AWS. Even with AWS, there are lots of materials, and knowing the specific area within AWS to get started with, that's the challenging part of that. And what you can find yourself doing is learning the right thing at the wrong time. And that's the most frustrating thing, because you don't know the journey you should take. You can start picking up the right tools or technologies to learn, but because you're supposed to learn certain things before that, you start to struggle on that particular thing that you're learning, and you get frustrated, right? And because of that, it becomes very, very daunting for you. So, and that's where a program like ours shine, because we literally get you to focus on what you need to learn at every step of the way, okay? So But if you really want to focus more on the free resources, by all means, you can even search on Google some articles written that gives you like a roadmap, and you can follow that roadmap, find tools, materials online, and start learning. But it's not just about learning, it's about the community and the support you need to get while you're learning, because honestly, it's hard to do it on your own. I can tell you for free, when I was learning, it took me a lot of courage to try to navigate this on my own. And even at that, I'm glad to have found someone down the line that actually helped me a lot. Okay. And that was my first boss, which I was sharing the other time, that told me, Dari, if you mess this up again, you're fired. I had that opportunity and I'm grateful for it. So it's really, really hard. Try to do it on your own. So if you can afford and get yourself into like maybe the externship program or the training program itself, then by all means, please do that. And if you want to know about the cost of the extension program, please reach out to us. You can send us an email. You can even send me an email. So my email is dari@dari.io. I can put it in the chat there. I get a lot of emails, but I always attend to my emails, and I have an amazing team that also help me a lot to make life easy. So yeah, so please reach out, and then we can see how best we can help you. The thing is, we run certain scholarship, okay, especially for people in emerging economies in Africa, Caribbean, like Sandra mentioned the other time, South America, India. We have certain scholarship that we use to help people. Okay, but reach out. We'll see how we can help you depending on your location. All right. So Chukwudi says, I've always been passionate about tech, but pursued it alone, facing distractions without a mentor or project to develop my skills. Joining that has been a turning point, guiding me in the right direction. Thank you very much for that, Chukwu. I work at a college of nursing, primarily administering computer-based tests. I recently discovered scripting and other tech processes at Data.io. In 2 weeks, I've learned to navigate Linux commands, create AWS instances, and document projects on GitHub. Check out my Linux, my mini project. Well done, Chukudi. I'm going to check out your project and see how you're getting on. But I'm glad that that has been very, very helpful to you. And especially the foundation program, that's one of the things it does to you. It gets you quickly to start getting your hands on tools and give you the proficiency to qualify for the externship program. And the externship program is your accelerator. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to get to. And we have been partnering with a lot of organizations right now, and those companies are actually our launch pad for people graduating from the externship program. So at the end of the day, we have a talent infrastructure offering whereby we build the talent and then walk you all the way through to employment. So at the end of the day, we also help you with employment. We establish partnership with organizations looking for engineers, and companies are always looking for talent, okay? So the best time is to start now, okay? If you're still thinking, oh, is DevOps saturated, like Faith is asking, I mean, that question, okay, I'm going to turn it around and say, is software development saturated? Because you will see software developers all over the place, right? Engineers, front end, back end, all over the place. But the question is, are they saturated? Companies are always looking for talent. There's new projects going on. Companies are heavily running their businesses on technology. Think about that for a second. There are projects that get established every time. Even in our own little Dari.io company, we establish projects every single time. There's always need to automate something, to improve a process, to do something, whether it's around data analytics, whether it's around automating our processes, or whether it's around establishing a new platform. So for example, when we launched our externs program, let me put the link in the chat. That was a new project that we literally had to start, and we're still building a lot of things around it, okay? And that's how a lot of companies come up with new ideas, new concepts, and there will always be need to find engineers, to work on them. Always need for engineers to work on things. So when a new project starts, software developers are going to be needed, cloud engineers are going to be needed, SRE engineers, platform engineers, cybersecurity engineers, data analysts, you name it, So nothing is saturated. Nothing is saturated, So always start. Where you want to be at is you want to be at the position where you are very good. And anyone can get to that. You just have to be curious. You just have to be consistent. You just have to keep going at it. That's basically it. All right. So Ola today says I've completed my first step on the learning path, about 40 steps. I'm currently on cohort 2, solutions architect and lawyer. So far, I have had a great time in this DevOps journey. Challenging though, the challenge I have now is that I don't seem to have the deep knowledge of shell scripting. The shell script capstone project on the learning path, I scored 52. That's my lowest so far, but I'm looking to major on cloud engineering. Do you think I really need shell scripting? Okay, that's a very good question, Olatunde. The reason for that is I had a call with one of our students today as well, talking about the same thing, shell scripting. And he was like, I've been on this for long and I'm just not getting it. I keep trying to get it, I'm not getting it. It takes time. Okay, it takes a bit of time. And sometimes you can give it a go, try to do something, try to make sense of it. Okay. If it's not coming, you can leave it and move on to something else. Okay, leave it for a bit, move on to something else. Tech is about expanding your knowledge. The more knowledge and exposure you have to things, the more it opens up your brain to understand how things work. Now come back to it after some time, maybe a few weeks or so. Come back to it, the same thing that you tried before, attempt it again. Okay, go on YouTube, find some crash course, learn. Always try to learn something, practice. You'll be surprised how things will start picking up for you over time. Do I really need shell scripting? Of course you do. It's a heavy part of what you're going to be doing ultimately. Okay, and it's going to help you too in your job, because sometimes you start doing things repeatedly and you feel like you just need to automate it. You put up a shell script quickly and you put that through. Maybe put some automation around some scheduling with cron or something, that it just takes care of it for you. But one good thing is when you get into the externs program, right? Like we're going through a sprint right now. So if you guys if you are attentive and you're following us, what we're going to be doing is every end of the sprint for our externs, they're going to be doing their demo where you'll be able to join and see, like on a session like this, and be able to contribute, ask questions about what they've been working on in the last 3 weeks. So a sprint is 3 weeks for us, and they're going to share what they've been working on. So let me give you a hint. So they have started a sprint, and they've been working on, the sprint goal is to set up the infrastructure initially from a base level, the pipelines, they're using GitHub Actions, set things up and start working on Packer to automate the build of AMIs. And the initial phase of that work, there's heavy shell scripting involved, and all the guys are getting the opportunity to learn how to bake an AMI into CSI benchmarks and putting all that logic into shell scripts, writing functions, putting logic into functions, the Packer template, calling the functions. And it's amazing how things are turning out, whereby at the end of the day, you have a very secure AMI, which will become the base AMI for the different tools that they'll be installing. So installing Splunk, installing Grafana, Prometheus, and the different tools on Linux servers. Okay, so this particular project is not even focusing on Docker, Kubernetes, whatever. We're getting them to have solid foundation on Linux, on automation with Terraform, Ansible, working with servers. Okay, and then once they deliver that project, it will be to move on to other projects which Docker Kubernetes will be part of. So I'm excited about that. And that's where you guys need to be. Once you get into the program, you complete your foundation, you can actually qualify for the extras. Finish your foundation, apply for the extras, and get yourself started. And that is the huge acceleration that you're going to have when it comes to going for interviews, because you have the confidence that you picked up tickets, you've gone through release cycle, you understand how releases are done. So it's a game changer. All right. So Ibukun says, DevOps is an interesting field, but not for the faint-hearted. I feel curious-minded people will enjoy DevOps as it helps you to think outside the box. Absolutely. Currently working on Terraform, and I get goosebumps every time I spin up my infrastructure and destroy as needed, leading to less cost of running infrastructure while making it better. Thanks to the team. So yeah, Ibukun, thank you very much for that shout out, and I'm glad that you're making all those strides, building your infrastructure, tearing it down. It's very, very good. And one thing I would say on that is every time you're writing your Terraform, every time you're building infrastructure, doing all those sort of things, if you have a logic that you want to put in there, always take it in bits. I always say this and I'll keep saying it. Do not try to put all the code in one place. Sometimes it may be relevant. Obviously, by the time you get better at this, maybe you're refactoring your Terraform code into modules, and you know what you're doing, you know where your outputs and your input variables and those things are going to be. But for the most part, make sure that every time you're putting a little change in, you're testing it, running your Terraform plan or apply, just so you know that if any error occurs, you know exactly what you changed most recently, and you can go there and fix it, as opposed to running it after you made a lot of changes and you see a whole bunch of errors and you don't even know where to stop. Okay, that can be more time consuming because then you have to start looking at it one step at a time. Sometimes with Terraform, you can make a little change, maybe a syntax error, and then you run it and you see a whole lot of errors come on the screen. That's possible, but at least at that point, you won't be scared because it's a little change you just put there that definitely caused that error. So with that approach, it's easy for you to keep interacting with your Terraform, and then you can keep going on like that. Okay. So Matthew is asking, can one join the extern after just the foundation? Absolutely, yes, you can. You can apply to the externs and join once you finish your foundation, because the most important thing is to get the basic skills out of the way, and then you can start doing projects, in an order, right? So you finish from foundations, you join the externs, and you start working on projects that understands where you are, right? So you finish that project, you work with other engineers, you finish that project, you can move on to another project. So you will have access to the different kinds of projects that you will get to work on, and we'll recommend to you. We know where you are, we'll recommend to you how you carry on going from that angle. Okay, so Toby's asking, can you explain what the foundation is? I mean, the foundation before the extern. So the foundation is when you go to Diary.io and you subscribe, you go to the pricing page, or you're trying to sign up, or you sign up to the free plan to start watching the videos. You see there's a foundation plan there. So the foundation is where you get to work on Linux, there's no Ansible there. You work on Linux, a lot of shell scripting is there. You work on AWS, okay? So there are use cases that we'll put in there that you can follow the documentation that will expand your understanding around certain use cases to work with AWS, okay? And then Git. So Git is a heavy part of that as well, making you to understand collaboration from that angle, commit, pull request, those sort of things. So I think those are the three major area of focus for the foundation, even though it also has a bit of Docker and Kubernetes, but that is not the major focus of it. The major focus of it is to get your foundational skills right, and that is Linux, shell scripting, Git. Okay, even AWS, you can still, to a very minimal level, you understand infrastructure, a bit of networking, compute side of things. The real deal, okay, you get to see it when you start working with other team members at externs. And we also want to get a lot of people in the external side of things because we have launched our recruitment side of the business, and it's a talent as a service that we have recently created. And what that means is businesses get to work with us and we provide talents to them, on demand. So they can scale in, scale out, request for talent as they like. And from the pool of externs, knowing the tech stack that they want, knowing the tech stack that you have worked on at externs, we can use that to match the employers with what they want at any point in time. So we do want a lot of people in the externs community as well, so that we can build a lot more talent, and then you can get to work with us and with our potential clients as well as they get to ask for more externs. And the good thing is, it's a win-win for everyone. Okay, it's a win-win in the sense that the employers understand where you are, so you're not having to lie on your CV, and we don't want to encourage that. This is where you are. This is the skill level that you have. Okay, this is not you claiming X amount of years of experience. Okay, and getting to companies where they hire you on the basis of the lies on the CV, and you're struggling to deliver. They are wasting time and resources thinking that you're going to be able to deliver, and it just doesn't work well. So the solution that we have provided right now is to match people with what companies are looking for, because we know companies also want to build in-house talent themselves. Sometimes they're looking for junior engineers, but what we are providing to them is junior engineers that are not junior engineers, if that makes sense. They're actually at the mid-level to arguably senior level as well, because the level of work that they've done during their time at externs is amazing, and it's a win-win for everyone. The companies understand where you are, you understand where you are, there's the expectations align, and it just makes sense. So that's where we want you to be, that's where you want to try to be as well. So that's definitely something to look up to. Okay, so Onye Dikachi says, thumbs up, Dari. Just wanted to know if you would recommend one to do the foundation and advance before going into extern, or just move from foundation to extern. So you can actually move from foundation to extern. Okay, but we've seen people doing both simultaneously. So some of the people that are already on the extern, they're also part of the foundation. So they're getting knowledge from there. They're implementing on this side. So it depends. If you have time in your hands, then by all means, you can do both. Okay, so if you have time, because some people, maybe new grad from school, you're still living with parents, no commitments, no 9 to 5, no kids, unlike some of us that have like a gazillion of kids in our house, and you need to give time for family as well. But if you don't have all of that yet, you have time in your hands, by all means, do as much as you can. Get onto the advanced, get onto extens, just keep smashing it. Okay. All right. So let me see if there are a few more questions. And if I have missed your question, you could just rewrite and drop in. So Nyasha was actually asking Sandra, what's your perspective on the role of assurance providers, such as internal auditors, in delivering assurance? Okay. Do you believe organizations are receiving the value they need from auditors, while internal controls are crucial to corporate governance? My limited experience suggests that internal audit department may be falling behind in utilizing technology to enhance their assurance process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, send it over to Sandra, and then next week I'm definitely going to get a response for you. So Priscilla, if you're on the call, kindly take that, or Chineza, please take that question and help me keep it somewhere so that we can send that over to Sandra, and hopefully we can get some response. Yeah, so definitely tune in next 2 weeks, because we run this bi-weekly so that we can keep track and make sure we're keeping to push ourselves further and further and further. Okay, so if you have achieved things in the last 2 weeks, that's fantastic. You're starting another 2 weeks today. Make sure that you achieve something else, by the time we come up again next 2 weeks. Okay. Let me see. So Oge is asking, between Python and JavaScript, which one goes well with DevOps? First, Python. Okay, so if you want to choose between the two, what to learn, definitely Python first of all, because Python is even though you can use it for object-oriented programming, you can also use it for scripting. It's an interpreted language, meaning you don't have to build it before you can use it. So it's used for many use cases, like literally data science, automation, whatever it is, and it works well with DevOps. Okay, I mean, you can imagine interacting with AWS. There's a Python library called Boto 3, that literally you can use it to do a lot of things that Terraform does. And sometimes you would need that. You might want to write a Lambda function that is doing some things for you in the AWS cloud or any other cloud provider, for that matter. And you're going to need that level of automation. Because there is usually shall I say, between Terraform, Ansible, all these different tools, some of them overlap. They're able to do things that the others do. Like Ansible, you can actually use it to provision infrastructure, even though it's more of a configuration management tool. But you need to draw the line between where they stop. Okay. Terraform as well can be used to do configuration management, just the way Ansible is for configuration management. But you want to draw the line between the fact that Terraform does its infrastructure provisioning. And when it comes to the configuration management side of things, you want to make sure that you use the right tool for that. Okay. And sometimes Python is just the best tool to use for certain use cases that you don't want Terraform or Ansible to take care of, especially, if you have some use cases to maybe run some Lambda. Let me think of a use case. So for example, let's say you work in a team where you have infrastructure in dev environment, production, you have different environments, and maybe sandbox environments where you do your testing and things like that. And you don't want your servers to be running 24/7 because it's going to be costing you. So you want to be able to shut them down at a certain time, bring them back up at a certain time. So a typical use case could be that you have to put a tag to your resources that says environment, sandbox, or whatever. And then you can have a Python script that will always scan your infrastructure. And if it finds that tag, when it's a certain time of the day, it will shut all the instances down. And then when it's a certain time of the morning, it brings them back up again when people are resuming to work. So that's a use case. For example, you don't want to put that in Terraform because, you run Terraform, it does exactly what you want it to do, right? And if you run it to shut down your infrastructure now, that means you have to run it again, to bring it back up, that sort of thing. So you can put Lambda function as part of your Terraform infrastructure that deploys the Lambda, okay? But the logic in the Lambda does exactly what I've just, shared. Bring up the servers, bring it down, and then you put all those sort of logic. Can you do that with JavaScript? I don't know, but I haven't tried doing that with JavaScript, but you definitely want to use JavaScript for more of, software development rather than scripting or these sort of things. All right. So yes, Adarem is asking, is the extension program also open to data engineers? Yes, that is true. Actually, we have just recently hired a data scientist that is working with us now. The first part of the data engineers, data analysts, data science, whatever, we're actually building a waiting list for that. And we're building the project, the use cases, we're creating the user stories, the epics, and all of that. So if you're interested in the data side of things for the extension program, please reach out and we can add you to the waiting list, because we need a certain number of people before we can kickstart a particular pod, right? It's a maximum of 9 engineers per pod. So once we hit 9, then a pod can start. So a pod is a team of engineers working in the externship program. So if you want to join the waiting list, you can reach out, sign up, join the waiting list. As soon as we start the pod, you will get started, and it fills up quickly because obviously people like it. All right. So what tech course is best suited for a facility manager? So Kenny is asking what tech course is best suited for its facility manager. Well, so what I would say is this has nothing to do with a facility manager or any other role at all. It has more to do with the question of, do you want to do tech? If you want to do tech, then what area in tech interests you? So if you're someone that loves web, okay, you want to be able to build website, develop apps or things like that, then you may tend towards the software development side of things. If you're someone that likes to, you like numbers, you like to analyze data, you see things and you are the type that remember things very well. So for example, I'm not good with dates, like really, I'm not good with dates. But there are some people that are very good with dates. My son, for example, is very good with dates. Like he's the one that remembers everyone's birthday. He's the one that remembers the date that something happens. There are some people like that. That memory is good for things like that. And I think people like that are quite analytical. They may tend towards the data analysis side of things. You like to analyze things. You can remember numbers. You like numbers. Those sort of things. But if you're the type that likes operations, maybe like the facility manager that you mentioned now, project management from a technical side of things, maybe something like DevOps Cloud may work for you because it's more of an operations type thing. So yeah, you could just do some research to learn about the different careers in tech and see what aligns to your interest. That's the way I see it. Okay. Now there are some people, it doesn't even matter what it is. What they care about is the money they can make from it. And I don't blame you. I was like that when I was starting as well. I just want to get into tech and make money. And that's fine. But even though that's there, you still want to make sure you align it with your area of interest. Like I said to you, I started learning HTML and web development and all that at first. It didn't really align to me because of timing. I felt like I need to do something to get me out there quickly, and I felt like that would take me a longer time. And then I pivot. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do web development at the time was because my first education was in marketing, so I did H&E marketing, and I wanted to do something that will put me around digital marketing. And web development was actually the answer to that at the time because I would understand Google Analytics, and, HTML and those sort of things, and understand how things run from that angle. But again, I didn't really understand a lot of things at the time. Honestly, I was just exploring. I was curious. I was doing all that. So yeah, again, so make sure it aligns with what you like, interests, and try to learn and research about the things that they do in those respective areas. All right. Onoya Ruku says, I started already with Microsoft 365 engineer and I want to widen my tech skills. What will you suggest for me? So that's good. So you're in the Microsoft space, Office 365. That also sounds more like operations, IT support, that sort of thing. And naturally, people in the support side of things naturally work well in the SRE cloud space, because it's about supporting infrastructure and things like that. Okay, so let me see. Do we still have a few more questions? Okay. So these are some of the comments when Sandra was speaking. I'm just scrolling through now. And Kemi was asking Sandra if there were times in her career that she feels siloed in the organization she worked for, or sabotage because she's a woman. So I'll take that as well. So please, Chinaza and Priscilla, if you can please take that question too. I'll send it over to Sandra and then we can get response and send that back when we are here again next 2 weeks. And Kemi was saying, thanks to my previous coach that I ask questions a lot in interviews. Yes, I think I remember when Sandra was talking about you have to ask questions. Yes. Okay. I'm just trying to scroll through to make sure I haven't missed out anything. Right. Okay. So Obi Digbo says that he's been trying to speak to us via WhatsApp, email, and chats on the website, but no one replies. Is there any other way to contact? Well, that's strange though, because we sort of respond to everything. So maybe the WhatsApp you're using is disconnected for some reason, but thanks for highlighting that. So if you can please reach out, send an email to me, Dare@Dare.io. That's DARE@DAREY.io, and I will take that off. Okay. All right. So Ibuku says he's been working on automating infrastructure with infrastructure as code using Terraform Part 4, Terraform Cloud Dynamic Inventory for Ansible. That's amazing. Well done. I think you're getting there, with if you are already at that level already, you immediately qualify for externship. So, you can apply and let's see if we can help you get in. Okay, Abdul Jali says, I've completed courses in Agile, Scrum, and UX Search. That's good. That's another angle of tech that is also attractive. Although we don't offer any UX research, but soon we're going to be introducing Agile, Scrum. So for those who are interested in project management, Scrum, or whatever, you can reach out as well. We have a waiting list for that too. Do you have advice going forward? Okay, I've seen that before. For one who wants to pivot from sales into IT as a product manager, what foundations would you recommend? I've completed courses in Agile and UX. Okay, so Abdujali is trying to get into product manager and foundations. I think you've started on a very good note. You've done your Scrum, UX research. I would say learn more about Figma and the prototyping tools as well. Okay, because as a product manager, one of the things you'll be doing a lot is work with business analysts and putting the product's ideas to life and really understanding the user experience side of things. So you've done that well, but I guess you probably just need to widen your scope in terms of training and find a platform similar to ours that offers something like our externship program that really gets you to do things from a more hands-on perspective. Although we don't offer that, but yeah. Elijah was asking, I think you missed the question. Posting again for visibility. Is coding knowledge a prerequisite for starting the DevOps Foundation with Dare.io? So there is no prerequisite for starting the foundations with Dare.io. Basically, you can come hands up with nothing in your hands or pocket and literally will take you up from there. All we ask that you have access to is strong internet and have a computer with at least 8 gig of RAM. And if you can afford it, buy extra monitors, okay? So have 1 or 2 monitors, HDMI that you can connect to it, because you're going to be doing a lot of things, moving across screens, dragging things around, watching videos somewhere, working on your terminal somewhere, so it's quite hands-on. So that's all you need. So join the foundation program and then you can just kick off your career from there. All right. So Joshua says, I researched and saw that DevOps is a bit affiliated with backend development. What do you think about it? So I'll tell you what. So Joshua, if you're still on the call, DevOps is basically coining 2 words together, development and operations. Okay. And when we say development, it's not just about back-end development, back-end, front-end, middle-end, whatever end it is. Anything that has to do with development, We're bringing it together with operations so that we can eliminate silos between teams in those part of the business. Because previously you would have teams where in the development side you have testers, you have backend developer, front-end developer, you have the project manager, you have all sort of people working, and then in the operations side you have Linux administrators, database administrators. You can have testers there as well. You can have project managers, and they both have different different passion, or I'm looking for the right word. Their motivation is different. Okay, the motivation for a developer or people in the development space is to continually develop and create products and release features. That's all they want to do. That's the motivation behind what they're doing. The motivation for the operations guys is to keep things operating. Nothing breaks. Okay, servers are always working. The database is always live. There's high availability. Disaster recovery is sorted out. Backups are always in place. That's basically what both teams' motivation is, right? But because they operate in silos, they're always at loggerheads, because this developer or the development team, they always want to push out new products. And every time there's a new product that goes into operations side, is always a risk. There's always risk attached to it, because some libraries or some things that come in with the new change may not work well with some of the things that exist already. And if they don't work together, it can break things. And when things break, the developers are not the ones that are called at first. It is the operations guys that are called. So in the middle of the night, that pager, rings, and they call them up and say, the server is down, the customers cannot access the websites, the backup is not running, things are happening. And then you see them running helter-skelter in the middle of the night, and people are on call, making sure that things come back to normal. And then after this incident has been resolved and they start doing fact finding to understand what was the cause, and then they realize that it was the change that was introduced by the developers. And for that reason, anytime there is a new change that comes, the guys on the operations side are always pushing back. Go back, go and test it. Have you tested it? How many tests have you done? And those things can cause friction between the two teams. They get to fight a lot. And the reason that is because they operate in silos. The operations guys don't know what the developers are doing. And because they don't know what they're doing, they don't trust what they're bringing in. So DevOps essentially is a concept that says, okay, why don't we bring these two teams together? Why don't they work together? If they work together, the operations guys would know everything they're working on. They understand the tests that they have been through. They even help them to put automated tests in place so that by the time the product is about to be released, there's a certain level of trust. And at the end of the day, we are able to release products much faster. And in the previous way of working that I described before, when they were in silos, who bears the major brunt of it all? There's two people that bears the major brunt. Okay, although one of them bears the strongest brunt of it, which is the business, because the other side of the spectrum that bears part of the brunt can move on and find an alternative, which is the customer. So imagine if you go to, if it's a banking application and you can't transfer your money, or someone has transferred money to you, you can't receive it because the fix that developers are supposed to put in, the operations guys are pushing it back because they're not trusting it yet. It has to go through certain tests, and sometimes it may take even weeks before it happens. At that time, customers will be frustrated, yes, but they have an option. They could go to another platform and register there and just carry on. But the person that bears most of the brunt here is the business. The business is going to lose money, the business is going to lose customers, and the business, guess what, is still going to pay you. The business is going to pay salaries. So to help the business, it just makes sense for every business to want to hire the DevOps function, to set up a DevOps function in an organization, bring them to work together. They can release product much faster. And by the way, releasing product fast is not just about getting anything out there. Releasing quality product fast is what we're talking about here. So being able to put automation that would automatically test things, that will automatically put quality gates in there to ensure that whatever is going out is of top quality, highly secured, and highly available. Right from the infrastructure side of things all the way to the application side of things. Everything works in alignment. So that's exactly what DevOps is all about. So back to the question. So let me see. So it was Joshua that asked the questions. So I researched and saw that DevOps is a bit affiliated with backend development. What do you think about it? So basically, I wouldn't say affiliated to backend development. It's more of doing the backend stuff, okay, to make products release fast. Okay. Now there will be backend developers that will work on backend stuff. You're not the one as a DevOps engineer writing the backend code from the application perspective. Okay. That's not what you're doing. Leave that to the PHP guys, to the JavaScript guys, to the Java guy, to the C# guys, C++ guys. They will do all of that. What you are doing from the backend side is building the infrastructure, making sure that it's highly available, making sure that things are automated enough to support the application. Okay, so you really need to understand the differences between these things, and then know where you stand. Okay, so Chukwudu says, do you need skills in both development and operations to bridge the gap between the two as a DevOps engineer? So the good thing about DevOps is people come from different side of the industry to become DevOps engineers. So some people who are working as backend engineers and they transition into DevOps, okay, there are certain part of DevOps that is going to be natural to them and they can support. So the fact that you're a DevOps engineer does not mean that you know everything. Okay. In fact, when you work in a DevOps team, the team have diverse set of skills. So some people are very good at databases. So for example, I come from a database background. I used to do database administration, SQL Server, Oracle, and all of that, right? And as a DevOps engineer, there are certain work that tend towards the data side of things. So if you work in a team where you have different people with different backgrounds, right, you find out that certain tasks will naturally just align to you and you can help the team from that angle. Now, if you're coming from a back-end development perspective or even front-end development perspective, there are certain tasks in the team that naturally you can pick up. I'll give you an example. So I used to work with within a team where we were doing a lot of heavy work perfecting our release, okay? And we wanted to have visibility into what version is deployed to what environment, even dev environment, and we needed to build a very basic web app within the organization whereby we can all log into it and have access to that. We didn't have to hire developers from outside to do it. It was people within the DevOps team that handled that. So there were people from the back-end development side of things that actually handled that. There are people from front-end development that actually supported that little project within the DevOps team. And I, coming from a database perspective, I helped design the schema of the application. And before we knew it, we had an application that was working. So again, some people may not come from any of those backgrounds, and that's fine, okay? But the new knowledge that you've now had, which is the Terraform, the Ansible, the Docker, all those things, is still very relevant to what you're doing because, like I said, there are different people with different teams. And, if you have a large DevOps team, then you find out that you're definitely going to find your space. You'll be surprised when you join an organization and you see the backlog of tickets. For those who are already in the extens program, can tell already the backlog right now has a lot there, and we're going to be putting things into sprints, and delivering projects like that. So you look at the backlog, there's different things to do, and you find something that resonates with you more, resonates with your skills, and especially if you're well prepared for it, it won't be a problem. All right, so Olawale says, my wife and son is rounding up DevOps Foundation. When are you starting the advance? So I think I don't have that information top of my head, to be honest. But if you can send me an email, I can respond to that and let you know. But I think there's a DevOps class that is rounding up now, and we're going to start another one immediately after that. So once your wife and son rounds up what they're doing, you might also want to see if they qualify for the externs program and see whether that might align well with them. Okay, Olukemi says, I am a newbie to tech and currently PM and BA. What would you advise next, please? So I think I've addressed this in another question. If you want to launch your career into tech, you're not really sure where, it's down to researching the different areas in tech that might align well with your interest, So what I have found a lot of people in the project management and BA that they have done is, especially for those who have worked with cloud and DevOps engineers, because they hear a lot of technologies and things and they don't quite understand it very well, it makes them curious to want to get into that space. Okay, and they do well as well. They just go for it. Okay, software development. I mean, you just have to understand that it's going to take some time if you want to. I mean, everything takes time, but I think if you want to learn software development, front and back, it'll take a bit more time than even DevOps. If you're learning DevOps and you have the time, in 6 to 12 months, you can actually be at a very, very comfortable place. We've had people do it for 6 months and they get hired, they get job, so that's not a new thing. But I doubt if that will happen for software development, unless you find like a junior level role with that. And the other option people go for is like data analysis. Okay, so again, depending on how far you want to go with that, data analysis, naturally you would then go into data science and machine learning and all that later. Okay. Chukudi says, do you need skills in both development? Okay, I think I've done that. And approaches to bridge the gap. Yeah, I think I've handled that. Adebayo says, I have my undergrad and master's in finance and business management. I've always been in finance, commercial, and now investment banking, and now doing the advanced DevOps course with LI. But I keep thinking about how I will convince potential employers that I am better than competitors who have computer science and engineering degrees. So this is another thing, I would just advise, get onto the externs, get onto the externs. There's a lot of people. We actually have someone who was a lawyer that did our program, and now she works as a DevOps engineer. So convincing employers is not a problem, honestly. And they don't care about your computer science, except if you are applying for a data science type of role or AI type of role. Really, a lot of companies don't really care whether you have computer science or not. What they care about is, look, mate, can you get the job done? Can you do this? Can you hit the ground running? And you can convince them from the interview process. Okay. In some cases, it might be a task that they will send over to you to do, if you can convince them by implementing it. For example, when I worked with Sainsbury's some years ago, they gave me a project to do. And boy, I spent the whole weekend doing that, and I had to submit it on a Monday, and I think it was given to me on a Friday. I spent the whole weekend doing it, for some reason I had something to do in church. Maybe I was the one playing the piano for the service that weekend. And I took it to church. Like every single opportunity I had, I would grab my laptop and quickly try to do it. So you have opportunities like that to convince, and you document your work very well. And by the time you go into the interview and you speak about it, that's the conviction they need. The way you speak, the way you articulate yourself, the way you talk about the logic that made you to do the work. Those are the kind of things that you really need, honestly. And your CV, just be honest about what's going on there. Especially if you have gone through the extension program, honestly, you will be able to then go over the different projects that you have done, and you can defend it. Do you understand? You can defend it. It's not one of those things where you pack a whole lot of things on your CV, and then when they ask you questions about it, you can't defend it. Because you haven't really been there. Okay. Toby says, does that mean to some extent you do not need developers in an organization if you have a DevOps team? No. I haven't said that. If you have a DevOps team, the work of the DevOps team is to make sure that we can have a culture that allows us to release software fast in the hands of the customers. And who writes the code for the software is the development team. So you still need the developers to do that. But as a DevOps engineer, or working in DevOps, and in some cases, some companies don't have a DevOps team. Okay, what they have is they have development team, and part of the development team, they have a DevOps engineer in there. So if it's a startup, a small company that doesn't have huge money to set up a dedicated team for DevOps, it's just a matter of putting one DevOps person in that development team. And during the stand-ups, they're all working together. The developer is giving their updates from a development perspective, and then the DevOps guy is also giving his updates from the DevOps perspective, and they can all collaborate together. So, for example, a developer may need a server to do something, and you are the DevOps guy in the team. You have your Terraform there to make that happen, or maybe the Docker file that you have helped them put together, to build the application into an image has some issues, or the pipeline is failing. You are there to fix that and to help them and just make the whole work smooth. Okay. Adoremi says, on the extension program, it is showing no slots available. So you can actually sign up and hit the waiting list. But if there are no slots available for that, what you can do is send me an email, because the extension program fills up really quickly, honestly. And we have a huge waiting list there. So the early you get onto the waiting list, the better. That's all I can say. Even if you're still doing your foundation right now, I would highly recommend you get onto the waiting list now, because when we create new pods, we'll only look in the waiting list first of all before we assign you to a pod. Okay. Let me see. John Mary says, I was told about joining the pod. Can you tell me more about how Dari execute this? Okay, so the way we execute the externship is that, like I said before, we have a maximum number of engineers per pod. So a pod is the team working together, okay? Maximum of 9, and there's a reason why we do that, okay? And once the team completes, we kickstart it. You will be part of a Slack channel. It's not the same Dari.io Slack. There's a different Slack for that. You have access to Jira. You have access to AWS. You have access to industry tools. It's pretty much like working for an organization, okay? And then you start doing your sprint ceremonies. There are certain ceremonies like sprint planning, stand-ups, backlog grooming, retrospective. All those things are things that's done in the real world, and you're part of a team that does that with a project manager, and then you have a technical lead as well. And then you start picking up tickets. So a ticket could be around setting up the pipeline. You pick up a ticket to work on it. You collaborate with other engineers. You can pair on the work, and you have that support. Once you're done, you then, raise your pull request, you get reviewed, you get feedback, and then you just carry on like that. And that's it. You keep on from one project, from one ticket to another, and you start building up the experience. Some of the things that I would like to mention on that is that it's very flexible. The meetings, the ceremonies I'm talking about, the team agrees what time works for everyone. Okay. So some teams have their stand-up 7 o'clock in the evening. Stand-ups are 15 minutes call. It's a daily update. And then when it's time for the sprint planning and all that, it happens at that same time. So they agree on a fixed time and they do their ceremonies at that time every day. Now, some teams even do theirs on the weekend. Okay. So it's just about, working collaboratively. And when it's time for pairing during the day, you can pair with your mates. Maybe one or two people can be working on the same ticket. They both agree on when, and if they need help, they have access to technical support to help them with our tech leads. And we run 3-week sprints. Organizations out there mostly run 2-week sprints. Okay, but because this is more of a training and career acceleration thing, we're doing 3-week sprints. The reason for that is if you're picking up a ticket and you need time to learn the technologies on that ticket, first of all, before you do the work, the first week is focused on that. So once you're confident to an extent, you can then jump on the ticket and then you can get it working. All right. So, we're also partnering with other boot camps. So if you're part of a boot camp or if you're running a boot camp, wherever, you can partner with us as well to help your graduates get a job. Because like I said, the most important thing with this is our partnership with organizations that are always looking to hire talent. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. Okay, Joshua says developers are needed, but DevOps bridges the gap between operations team and the development team. Thank you very much. Faith says they only care about Python, Kubernetes, Terraform, Docker, and others. They only care about your experience on DevOps. I'm not sure what that means. I think you're making a comment to something I mentioned before. Alawale says extension program site is showing us. Okay, we've talked about that. So if you don't have my email, please, I'm going to send it again. You can reach out to me and then I'll see how I can help. So I am the one to pick up the ticket to work on, or will it be assigned? If no, does the pod encourage switching of roles like from architect or DevOps within the same pod? Okay, so the way we run it is so when it's time for sprint planning, we do the sprint planning and we have backlogs that are put into the sprint. Okay, during the sprint planning, we also discuss who wants to work on things. So you can actually indicate interest to work on certain tickets. You can get assigned to that. And you can also pick up tickets from the backlog within the sprint as well, especially if you finish working on something and you want to work on another ticket within the sprint, you can go into the backlog and pick up a ticket yourself. Now, if you want to, the skill you're going to learn is actually going to go beyond just as a DevOps engineer. You would eventually be able to work even as an architect because, for example, in the pods that we're running right now, there are some of them where there are some tickets in the backlog where they're actually going to work on the design of the infrastructure. And we also do design as code. So you can think of designing diagrams, but you're not using draw.io. You're not using any of those. You're actually writing Python to draw your architecture. And that's a huge value that you can bring to an organization where you have those sort of skills, because then you can have everything as code, infrastructure as code, configuration as code, even your diagram as code. And I think that is so powerful. Okay. All right. I think I've gone through all the questions. If there's anyone that I have missed, so please send me an email and we can take it up from there. Thank you so much, guys. And in 2 weeks' time, we're going to come back to this session again. Go and work, right? Go and work for the next 2 weeks. Go and achieve something. And by the time we're meeting again, we want to talk about your progress. We want to talk about, what you've achieved in the last 2 weeks. And that's the only way we can keep going, guys. Please make sure you're making your progress. Make sure that, you're not slacking behind, because there's a whole lot of opportunities waiting for you ahead. All right. So thank you so much for joining me, guys. And I will see you again in 2 weeks. Peace.